Hello everyone, and welcome to the next segment of our training, Get Organized. Before we get started, we do encourage you to watch the teaser video that was posted at the end of February. That gives you a little bit of context for the whole process if you haven't really got it started yet. There was pre-work and some quick tips that were happening in that video. Then last week we did the Get Clean video. We wanted you to have a clear visual indicator of your to-do items, and by accomplishing the work in the Get Clean video, you would get to inbox 0. Those are helpful tips to get started on what we're going to work on today. Just a quick shot about me once again. My name is Jennifer Buchholz, and you are with me for all the training we're doing with Leader 1. Now, just a reminder about the overall process. The steps are get clean, get organized, get streamlined, and get started. So the way that we're covering this is we're actually doing the get clean last week, get organized this week. Next week, we take all the stuff from get organized and put that into the get started. And then we use the get streamlined to leverage some other tips, tricks, and shortcuts. Again, today we're focusing on get organized. That's about workflow and task management. Now keep in mind overall that this is looking at the 5 steps in email processing. There's flow, triage, task management, archive, and then actually retrieving the messages. We'll be referring back to this set of steps throughout the training today. So if you feel like you're buried in your messages and you're not quite sure where to start, that's what we're going to be covering in Get Organized. I've put together some helpful informational explainer videos for you to help guide you through the next steps in the process. So in this section, we're going to start taking that Get Organized part to the next level and figuring out where to go with the things as you're processing the email. Think about this as a time when you actually got a stack of mail. Maybe you got back from vacation, or you've collected all this mail, literal physical paper mail, and you need to figure out what to go do with it. And when you have that stack of mail, it's a lot faster to sort through all the piles and be like, bill, magazine, junk mail, and you could figure that all out. And from there, you would actually start processing in batches. Well, that's what this technique is meant to teach you, is how to take that flow of email, triage it, so you've now put it in your batches, so that then you can go get the stuff done in a reasonable order, rather than just doing stuff as it comes in. So take the concepts that we've just learned from the David Allen's Getting Things Done of the 4 Ds and +1, and we're going to start applying that to where does it go for processing and where does it go for storage. Keep in mind this idea of mail and your pile. It's always better to process in a batch. And keep in mind that when you were storing stuff, when it actually was paper, you would process from those piles and then stuff would go get stored elsewhere. So that's going to set the tone for where we go with this part of our conversation. So again, we have the step of delete, and I hope what you do with this stuff is obvious. It should go right to the trash bin. The next step in the process is to delegate, and we'll talk later in this session about where we put the stuff that we've delegated to, but it's going to be in a folder called waiting. Now, once you've done the thing, you have 2 places where you could put that message. You could put it in your keep folder for future retention if you need to store it. And if you're waiting for a response, again, we want it to go in this waiting folder. The next step in the process is probably the most important one for us. It's the defer part. This is it's work that you have to do yourself, but you need to know where to put it and how to keep track of it. You're going to put it in the respond folder and immediately set the priority of urgency and importance so you can go back to it and easily find what you need to be working on without scrolling. The final D that we added to this party is called direct. Remember, the idea here was to create some automations to keep things out of your inbox. So every time a message comes in that you can systematize, do it in the moment. Put your rules in place so that in the future, those things are going exactly where you want them without having to second guess it and without it sitting in your inbox for you to take the next step. Now let's talk tactics. What are the actual folders that you need to process your email? Remember, processing and storage are two different things. So we encourage you to have the minimum number of folders necessary for processing because I don't want you to have to keep wondering where your work is. But whatever system works best for you makes sense. The first folder is the respond folder. We've been talking about that for a while. The second folder, however, is one that I've mentioned a couple of times now, called the waiting folder. In the waiting folder, I actually take any of the items that I'm waiting to hear back from and store them specifically for processing in the waiting folder. So I might be grabbing things out of my inbox if I have things grouped as conversations, or I might be grabbing things literally out of my sent items and putting them in the waiting folder. What this allows me to do is to batch process my follow-up items. And that means that if there's stuff that I'm waiting on, I run to my waiting folder, perhaps on a regular basis or before a meeting. And from there, I go in and say, hey, I need to hear back from you on this by noon or by 3 or by 5. And I send all of those messages on items that I'm waiting for a response on at one time. So it really helps me batch my follow up by using the waiting folder. The other folder that I have as part of my processing is the read and review folder. That's one of the places that I automatically divert items or direct items out of my inbox into the read and review folder. I get a lot of newsletters, legislative updates, all sorts of information that I want to read, but is not urgent for me to do in the moment. So by going to the read and review folder, I just put a time, I make a habit to check my read and review folder at least once a week and clear that out. Read and review is not meant for storage. It's meant for you to take the processing action of read or review that information and then decide, am I deleting it? Am I forwarding it to someone else for some reason? Or am I keeping it? So those are the key processing folders that we recommend. You may have others, but again, the goal here is to keep this simple. For our storage section, I want you to think about what's working for you and what's not working for you. Again, if you're debating about whether you should delete something or keep it, just keep it. If you don't know where to put it, I want you to have the appropriate number of folders needed to store and find your messages. The keep folder can become a catch-all. That is not a problem. Just shove stuff into the keep folder if you want to keep it and aren't sure where to put it. Now, if you have a really beautiful folder structure that you're using and is working for you, keep doing that. Don't convert over to this very simplified structure. Instead, keep the parts of the storage process that are working for you and only change over to the things that are starting to clutter up your inbox. Don't overcomplicate this and do not try to switch from system A to system B. You don't need to go back through and change how you're storing your things. Again, you know how your storage systems are working and you can see where they're failing because they're clogging up your inbox. Only focus on the parts where they're failing and put that stuff in the keep folder. Keep this simple. So to recap, we've covered the getting organized processing component where you're keeping the minimum number of folders you need to process your work. These are temporary holding places for things before you decide if you need to keep them or delete them. For storage, you're keeping the appropriate number of folders that you needed, including a keep folder and any other folders that are working for you. But without a regular review, this process may not really be successful. So we encourage you to review the system regularly. Are you able to keep up daily? And every week, check and see if the system is working for you. Make appropriate adjustments and tweaks so that you are really able to stay consistent with processing in one place, like that stack of papers on your desk, and storing it in another place, like a file cabinet. Okay, so now that we have gotten through the steps for getting organized, it's time for you to get your processing folders in order and start using those. Remember, in Get Clean, we started putting stuff in the Respond folder. Now this is about using it. Keep in mind that we will have another live Q&A webinar this Thursday at 9 a.m. The email will have a link for that. Any questions you want answered, please submit those in advance using this link. And tune in next week for the Getting Started portion of our program. We'll send out the video on Monday, and then we'll have the live Q&A webinar on Thursday, March 19th at 1. Hope to see you soon.